Port Arthur, an echo of Australia's past. Nestled along the wild, untamed coastline of Tasmania lies one of Australia's most unique historical sites, Port Arthur. The tranquil beauty of this place masks the tragedy and resilience etched into its ruins. Once a foreboding penal settlement, Port Arthur holds echoes of a past filled with human suffering, hardship, and a glimpse into an evolving sense of justice. In this video, we will explore its layered history, how it functioned as a penal colony, the lives of convicts and settlers, its decline and transformation, and its eventual preservation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Join us as we uncover the compelling stories and lessons still preserved within the rugged stones and haunting silence of Port Arthur. To understand Port Arthur, we must first journey back to the late 18th and early 19th centuries. At the time, Britain faced an overcrowding crisis in its prisons. The solution? Transportation of convicts to penal colonies. Australia became their chosen destination, beginning in 1788 with the arrival of the First Fleet in New South Wales. Tasmania, then known as Van Diemen's Land, soon followed as a second penal settlement. Port Arthur was established in 1830 as part of this system, designed specifically for those considered the most hardened criminals. These were not first-time offenders, but individuals who had often re-offended while serving time in other penal settlements. Far from a land of new beginnings, for many, transportation to Port Arthur marked the end of hope and freedom. Port Arthur's layout reflected its purpose. Located on a secluded peninsula, surrounded by water on three sides and dense wilderness, it was virtually escape-proof. The only access point, a narrow strip of land called Eaglehawk Neck, was heavily guarded by soldiers and even a line of ferocious dogs. Constructed by convict labour, the settlement included prison cells, barracks, workshops and administrative buildings. Each part served a specific function. The workshops were imperative to the settlement's economy, producing everything from timber to shipbuilding materials. But to the convicts, these tasks often symbolised not rehabilitation, but brutal and gruelling labour. Life for the prisoners at Port Arthur was harsh and often bleak. Physical punishment, hard labour and dehumanising routines were daily realities. Convicts were put to work in dangerous conditions, such as felling timber or working in coal mines, with little regard for their physical well-being. Even for those not subjected to gruelling manual tasks, the psychological toll was immense. The separate prison was a facility where silence and isolation were the hallmarks of its operation. Here, inmates were forbidden to speak to one another, forced to spend their days in solitary confinement. Some were even hooded when they left their cells. While this form of imprisonment was considered more humane than flogging, its long-term impact often shattered the minds of those who endured it. Port Arthur housed its share of notable prisoners. One infamous case was that of Martin Cash, a notorious bushranger. After numerous attempts, Cash successfully escaped Port Arthur, an extraordinary feat given its geographic isolation. His story, however, is one of few where escape was triumphant. For most prisoners, Port Arthur was a place that consumed them. Stories abound of convicts attempting desperate escapes, only to be caught and subjected to even harsher conditions or executions. These individuals, though hardened criminals by British standards, were often victims of a justice system designed to punish rather than rehabilitate. It wasn't only prisoners who lived at Port Arthur. Guards, administrators and their families also called the settlement home. Their lives, while relatively stable compared to the convicts, were shaped by the same isolating remoteness. Free settlers established homes, schools, and places of worship, creating a self-sustaining community intertwined with the penal settlement. Yet, the heavy presence of discipline and the constant reminder of human suffering made the settlement unlike any other. In such an environment, societal lines were starkly drawn, and the presence of the convicts underscored the settlement's harsh purpose. While Port Arthur is remembered for its punitive system, it also housed some early attempts at prisoner reform. Authorities introduced measures such as education and training, teaching convicts skills in carpentry, blacksmithing, and shoemaking. The hope was to prepare these men for reintegration into society. Yet these efforts were not uniformly successful. Many prisoners left Port Arthur physically and emotionally scarred, unable to reintegrate even if they had learned a trade. Still, the workshops and industries left their mark on the settlement, particularly in the form of infrastructure and craftsmanship that can still be admired today. By the mid-19th century, transportation as a form of punishment began to fall out of favour, both in Britain and across its colonies. Critics argued that it failed to address the root causes of crime and perpetuated cycles of suffering. Port Arthur eventually closed as a penal settlement in 1877. What followed was a period of neglect. Buildings crumbled, materials were repurposed, and over time, nature began reclaiming the site. Villages emerged around the ruins, but the past clung stubbornly to Port Arthur, refusing to be erased. In 1996, Port Arthur became the site of one of Australia's darkest modern tragedies, a mass shooting that claimed the lives of 35 people. The event shocked the nation and profoundly altered the way Australians viewed gun ownership. Port Arthur's history is, unfortunately, marked not only by its convict past, but also by this devastating event. Yet, from this tragedy came unity. The massacre sparked sweeping gun reform laws in Australia, making it one of the strictest nations in the world for firearms regulations. The memory of that day is preserved respectfully within the site, ensuring it is never forgotten. Today, Port Arthur stands as one of the best preserved convict settlements in Australia. Its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site reflects not just the importance of preserving its physical structures, but also the stories of those who lived and suffered here. Modern technology has played a significant role in conservation efforts. Restoration projects have stabilised fragile buildings, while digital archives ensure that records of Port Arthur's history remain accessible. Oral histories, photographs, and archaeological research continue to enrich the narrative of the site. These painstaking efforts reflect the determination to guard this piece of Australia's past, ensuring that future generations can learn from it. Port Arthur is more than a physical space. It's a window into the social, economic, and judicial systems of colonial Australia. It challenges us to think critically about the concepts of justice, punishment, and rehabilitation. As visitors walk through its ghostly ruins, they are struck by the humanity behind the history, the lives lost, the spirits broken, but also the resilience that emerges through storytelling, memory, and preservation. In the quiet of the ruins, one can almost feel the echoes of the past. The remaining stone walls tell their own stories, marked by time but standing resilient against the elements. Photographs from the settlement's operational years, carefully preserved archival documents, and the hauntingly beautiful backdrop of Tasmania's coastline create a deeply immersive atmosphere. Visitors today can move through the penitentiary remnants, explore the workshops and guardhouses, and even walk Eaglehawk Neck, imagining the desperation of those who tried to flee. These moments of connection bridge the gap between history and the present, fostering an enduring appreciation of what was once here. Port Arthur is a poignant reminder of the fragility of human life and the enduring lessons of history. From its beginnings as a feared penal colony to its transformation into a preserved site for learning and reflection, it inspires us to consider the value of resilience, reform, and remembrance. But Port Arthur's survival is not accidental. It is the result of tireless efforts to preserve and honour its significance. As we walk through this site, we are called not only to remember the past, but to safeguard it for the future. Through stories like Port Arthur's, we come to understand the importance of historical preservation. These places are more than just sites on a map. They are mirrors reflecting both the light and the darkness of human history. They remind us who we are, where we've been, and what we have yet to learn. Let us treasure the echoes of sites like Port Arthur and ensure their stories resonate for generations to come.